Welcome to my discussion, which is about the role of immunomodulatory strategies to improve outcomes in sepsis. Let me begin by summarizing my project. So basically, sepsis is a prevalent and deadly condition which affects around a third of patients in ICUs worldwide, and around a third of those patients die. Immunomodulatory therapies may benefit these patients, and I will go into more detail about what those are specifically later, but the guidelines are currently unclear. Our network and meta-analysis showed that immunomodulatory therapies show clear benefits in several different outcomes, and so we believe that although more data is needed, they should be considered as add-on therapies in specific conditions for septic patients. If you don't care about this topic, you can go back to Instagram, but for the rest of you, let me continue with some more details. My name is Júlia, and I'm an MD-PhD student at Semmelweis University. My vision is standardized treatments for specific medical situations, and my mission is to delineate the best treatments and incorporate new technologies into care plans. I aim to do this through my two specific goals, both projects which I started this past fall, about investigating the safety and effectiveness of immunomodulatory therapies against standard therapy in septic patients, and investigating the safety and effectiveness of intravenous immunoglobulin therapy before and after the onset of septic shock. Let's begin with my first project. So what's the problem? Sepsis is a prevalent and deadly disorder in the ICUs, and we know that intravenous immunoglobulins and blood purification treatments such as plasmapheresis and hemoadsorption may improve outcomes. So what's missing? There's no clear evidence on patient-specific outcomes such as organ dysfunction scores. The data is inconsistent and the guidelines are unclear. Therefore, our aim is to investigate which treatment has the most beneficial effects on organ dysfunction and sepsis. So let's discuss these immunomodulatory therapies in a bit more detail. In sepsis, there is a dysregulated host immune response to infection, which leads to a cytokine storm and an immunoglobulin deficiency due to increased consumption and decreased production of immunoglobulins. This then leads to septic shock. So polymyxin B adsorption, plasmapheresis, and hemoadsorption are all blood filtration techniques which help filter inflammatory factors out of the blood, but they don't do anything about the immunoglobulin deficiency. This is why we think that there is potential for intravenous immunoglobulins to clear pathogens and toxins and interact with the innate immune system. Our clinical question is which immunomodulatory therapy ranks the best in improving organ function in septic patients. Our population is septic patients. Our interventions are IVIG treatment, plasmapheresis, hemoadsorption, and polymyxin B adsorption. Our comparator is standard therapy. And our outcomes are organ dysfunction via SOFA score and mortality. Our hypothesis is that immunomodulatory therapies are superior to standard therapy in improving organ function in septic ICU patients. The clinical implication of our study is that we would like to improve organ dysfunction and damage in septic patients. We did our search in 3 different databases. And as you can see, we began with 3,771 articles and ended with 70. And we aim to publish in critical care. Let me begin with my first outcome, which is change in SOFA score. So SOFA score is an organ dysfunction score which goes from 0 to 24, where 0 is the best and 24 is the worst. Therefore, a change in SOFA score, which is negative, is better. For this outcome, we had 21 articles available and data from around 2,500 patients. And here you can see our network plot, which, as it's a network meta-analysis, it shows how many direct comparisons there are between any 2 outcomes. So, for example, there were 3 articles which had direct comparisons between IVIG and placebo for this outcome, but none between IVIG and hemoadsorption. So in this case, all of that data had to come from statistics. Here you can see our force plot, which shows that IVIG had a mean difference change in SOFA score of minus 3.02 points on the SOFA score scale, which, while not statistically significant, we do consider to be clinically significant. In addition, we can see that polymyxin B adsorption had a both statistically and clinically significant reduction in SOFA score. And we can also see that although the other immunomodulatory therapies do not have a statistically significant result, they did trend better than standard therapy in SOFA score change. Here we have a Sucre plot, which is a surface under the cumulative ranking assessment plot, which the way to interpret this is that the area under each curve shows the likelihood of it being the best treatment. So as you can see, IVIG is the curve with the largest area under the curve, which means that it has the highest likelihood of being the best treatment out of all of these. In addition, we can see that standard therapy clearly has the lowest area under the curve and therefore has the lowest likelihood of being the best treatment. My second outcome is 28-day mortality, which is mortality at 28 days, so a higher number is worse. And for this, we had 55 articles and data from around 4,000 patients. And so again, we have a network plot, which shows how many direct comparisons there were between any two interventions. And again, here we can see that, for example, we had 20 articles that compared IVIG to placebo directly, but no direct comparisons between IVIG and hemoabsorption. And so here we can see that plasmapheresis had a clinically and statistically significant improvement in the odds ratio of the mortality. IVIG, again, following closely, but not statistically significantly. And as we can see, all of the other treatments had a trend of being better than standard therapy. And so again, we have another surface under the cumulative ranking assessment plot, which shows that quite clearly plasmapheresis has the largest area under the curve, which means that it ranks the best, or it has the highest probability of ranking the best out of all of the treatments. And standard therapy has the smallest area under the curve, so it has the lowest likelihood of ranking the best. In conclusion, immunomodulatory therapies show significant benefits in both outcomes. Our implication for practice is that immunomodulatory therapies should be considered in septic patients as an adjuvant therapy. And our implication for research is that more studies are needed to determine the optimal timing dosage strategy for these immunomodulatory therapies. This brings me to my second project, which is about investigating the safety and effectiveness of intravenous immunoglobulin therapy before and after the onset of septic shock. So what's the difference between sepsis and septic shock? Sepsis is a life-threatening organ dysfunction caused by a dysregulated host response to infection, which leads to an increased consumption and decreased production of immunoglobulins, leading to immunoparalysis. Whereas septic shock is the last stage of sepsis with profound circulatory and cellular abnormalities which require vasopressor therapy after adequate fluid resuscitation. At this point, there's a complete dysregulation of the systems, and it's very difficult to reverse. So as we discussed, sepsis is very prevalent in the ICU, and unfortunately around 10% of sepsis cases progress to septic shock, which has a shockingly high mortality of 46%. IVIG replenishes depleted immunoglobulin stores, a depletion which happens even faster in septic shock, which brings us to the question, at which point would it be the most beneficial? A recent meta-analysis showed that IVIG reduced mortality rate in septic adults by 14%, so it is a treatment with a lot of promise. However, the evidence is unclear on the best way to use it, and improper use leads to wasting. There are some problems with IVIG therapy. For example, it's very expensive, it's barely available, and it's a very rare resource as it can take up to thousands of plasma donations just to make 1 unit of IVIG. Therefore, our clinical question is IVIG treatment for sepsis more effective before or after the onset of septic shock? Our population is septic patients. Our interventions are IVIG treatment before and after the onset of septic shock. Our comparator standard medical therapy without IVIG treatment. Our outcomes is organ dysfunction, and our secondary outcome is mortality. Our hypothesis is that IVIG treatment is more effective in patients who receive it before the onset of septic shock. The clinical implication of our study is that we would like to improve patient survival and optimize resource management. In summary, I would like to be done with my first project by the end of August, and I would like to submit my second project by November. And I would like to leave you with a quote, which I think really emphasizes how rare and precious of a resource IVIG is, which is that no one thinks about how much blood it costs. Thank you for your attention.
My question would be, for example, in the clinical practice, in the 28 days of follow-up, is there any way to combine this type of therapies, or is that meaningful at all, or just one thing and that will be the one? What goes
all
with
of the studies that I saw had only one at a time. I mean,
I understand that at one time it's not meaningful, but when it starts, you start with one thing, and after 2 weeks you do something else. I
mean, there could be potential for it. I've just never seen an example of it.
Okay.